Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today's a different one. Today's a conversation with has been sort of a roles reversed. I posed the idea to today's guest that actually it's all well and good him going away and interviewing all these illustrious names in our sport, but it might actually be useful if we had a conversation with Spencer Kyte. So here we are, Mr. Spencer, the Admiral of Abbotsford. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you thinking outside of the box quite often when we are trying to figure out ideas and when I'm trying to figure out sort of some of the people to get on this show and running ideas past you for you to be able to be like, well, I could interview you. And it just feel like such a, well, how come we hadn't thought of this before? That could be fun. Seems like a thing, as you said, we should probably do to let some people know a little bit more about me, a little bit of where my fandom and my passion for this sport and the things that I do originated. So thank you.
Well, I will start as you start all of these conversations, and that is at the very start. Now, I know a little bit of this, but I think you're going to take us on a journey both from a viewer's perspective, but also from a me perspective. Where did your love of combat sports really start?
So it really started in the movies. It really started with those 80s martial arts films with The Karate Kid, with the oeuvre of Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal, and then learning and figuring out that Bruce Lee is a dude I need to watch, and, you know, American Ninja, and just all things martial arts. That then led me to a Taekwondo studio, which then led to me going, okay, this is great. Hang on, this is a thing that I can do. So I grew up, obviously, I'm Canadian. I grew up in a very hockey mad town with an older brother who, from a very early age, was recognized as a very good hockey player. So Canadian people will understand this, but the opportunity to play in the Ontario Hockey League, which is the top junior level in the province of Ontario, which then is essentially a feeder onto being drafted into the NHL. We have some hockey roots, some family connections into the hockey world, so that certainly helped him. And I did one lap of the rink, our side of the rink. At my first practice, I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and literally motioned up into the stands of, yo, come meet me in the dressing room because this ain't it. And so when I walked into a Taekwondo studio, and it was, you get to kick and punch some people, and you have to learn patterns and forms and things of that nature. I was just like, I'm in. You could tie this in with all these movies that I watch of everything else. Let's go.
Can you explain the feeling of that Taekwondo school? How did that Taekwondo school really resonate with you? What was it about that Taekwondo school? Not necessarily the kicking and the punching, but from sort of ethereal perspective, what was it about that Taekwondo school that made you say, okay, this is the one?
So the first place that I took a class was at the YMCA. And it did, as everybody, right? It didn't actually feel right. It didn't actually connect right to me. I don't know whether it was because it's just one of the large sort of community rooms at the Y, whether I didn't necessarily buy the guy at the head of the class that's sort of teaching us all this stuff. It just didn't necessarily resonate. And so we found a school in my town in Chatham, Ontario, and walked in, and it was like, I mean, you take a snapshot of what you think a dojo is going to look like and what a Taekwondo studio is going to look like. And it's in the little strip mall that has 3 shops, and you go in and there's a little front desk with all the pictures and all the trophies and, you know, a crappy couch for you to sit on when you're waiting to talk to whoever, and a door for the office. And then you go in and there's more trophies and more pictures, and the change rooms. and then just blue mats and mirrors on the wall and let's go. And it's this 5 foot mate. I mean, he was probably like 5'5", seemed bigger than that to me as a young child, but this little 5'5" South Korean man barking out numbers and occasional broken English, but very often just speaking Korean, and a whole bunch of people understanding exactly what this man wants. And it just has that feel of, I mean, I loved the Karate Kid, right? So it felt like Cobra Kai, except without all the aggro ridiculousness. Like, it wasn't the over the top aggro stuff. It was just the like, oh, this is what we're going to do. And so to then show up a couple times a week in those first few weeks and okay, I seem to be okay at this. And then have somebody go, no, you're actually good at this. You need to come more often. This is a thing you can do. Just when you're that age, for me at least, fills me with the like, okay, not only is this the thing that I'm now in love with, but it's a thing that just instilled confidence in me from the jump. I can do this. I'm good at this. This is my thing for right now.
So I think there's going to be a litany of points here that we're going to talk about purpose, and we're going to talk about a variety of other things. But having come from, as you say, an older brother, he's your older brother, you look up to him and everything else, and he is a prominent figure in the hockey scene. And we all know, right? If it's Canada, it's hockey predominantly. It feels to me from what you're saying is that Taekwondo had an ability to ground you and had an ability for you to build an identity for yourself within yourself, right? You had a Korean man that would scream things at you and you would follow him and bow when you were told to and not bow when you were not told to and throw high kicks when you were not supposed to and all of those sorts of things. And that school, that humility in the room, but with an understanding that if you cognizantly and very presently attributed your time and effort to something, you could get better at it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It also gave me different people to look to as role models, as influences. Because as you said, my older brother, for the majority of my young adult life, was the beacon for me. I need to be like, I want to follow this similarly, whatever. But then you introduce, my instructor, and you introduce the people that were the heads of the class and the people that would fill in to teach classes, and even just the students that are 2, 3, 4 years older than me that are taking an interest and showing an interest and saying, hey, you need to do this. This is a thing. Just sort of became a like, okay, I can have a world of my own. I can have these things that are outside of my family, that are outside of hockey, that are outside of school, that become mine and feel whole to me. And that was something that resonated and to this day is a thing that I think I wish everybody is able to find something like that along the way in life.
It feels to me, if I could encapsulate your description into a word, it feels like you're talking about community, right? And I think that was going to be my next point, was sort of, you spent so much of your early childhood being trucked around, following your brother doing the amazing hockey things, that it feels to me, and maybe you can talk on this a little bit, you felt, and I mean grounded, I mean at home. And as you say, you found a hierarchy, right? But you found a hierarchy where you had a solid footing and a very even, steady path that you could see, oh, there's a kid that's 2 years older than me, but he's been training less than me and I know a little bit more than him. But you also saw roles reversed, right? You saw a guy that had been training 15 years and was way better than you and had loads to teach you. And so that dichotomy allows for a young person, whether cognizantly or not, to feel like they are on a ladder of some form. Could you speak from a reflective perspective, what that community aspect did for you as a child?
So in addition to getting carted around to arenas throughout Southern Ontario and off to tournaments in different locations and things like that. We moved a lot when I was young. By the time I was 8 years old, I had lived in 3 cities. I had lived in 6 homes. And so just having roots, just feeling like we were settled somewhere was a whole new world to me, was an absolute game changer. This is someplace we're staying. And now I can set up my own group, my own set of people that, yes, I'm still going to get taken to my brother's things, Pete's things very regularly. And I have friends there and there's a little community there, but it's not really mine. It's sort of these are the people I'm with when I'm doing Pete's thing. And so to have my group of people and eventually bring friends into it, like friends from school that were like, hey, you seem to be really into this. Can I come to a class that then take it on, that it becomes the thing you're known for and the thing that is yours, just was a game changer for me. As I said earlier, like it creates a purpose at a certain level. It creates a focus, and just for me, gave me a sense of not only pride in what I could do and being good at this thing and being able to achieve and enjoy it, but just a sense of being settled. Like that was a place I knew 3, 4, 5 times a week by the end of it. Okay, no matter what's going on, this is where I'm going at 5 o'clock at night, and I'm going to tie that belt on, and we're going to do whatever it is that we have to do for this class. And usually at the end of it, we're going to get to do some sparring. And if I'm in a bad mood, we're going to have all the full gear on and everything, chest pads and everything. We're kids. We're not beating the hell out of each other. But I'm going to get in a fist fight that I'm allowed to get into, because I got in fist fights at school and you weren't allowed to get in fist fights at school. So I'm allowed to get in them here. And this is a thing that can help me deal with whatever myriad things I was dealing with.
So I was going to parlay to the violence, but you've kind of already done it for me. And I want to talk about both. First, I want to talk about this from sort of a bird's eye perspective. As a young child, being in a room where violence was sanctioned, being able to practice the violence, both without humans and with humans, how did a young, early teen, preteen Spencer rationalize the violence, if at all?
So the violence within the studio, within the Taekwondo classes, it was a component of it, but it's also martial arts. So there is the huge element of respect. And so it wasn't just unbridled violence. It wasn't just you go until we're done here. Like, this isn't fight to the death. It's point fighting. And if somebody got hurt, if somebody looked like they were in a bad spot, not only was it stopped, but you get on your knees and you face away and you show the respect to that person, that they are cared for and taken care of. I still remember to this day, we had a in-school competition and I happened to kick a kid directly in his throat. And he just, and down to the ground. Now, from a point fighting standpoint, that gets me points and I'm going to advance and I should be. And I knew the minute I saw his eyes go, drop to my knees, face away, wait till somebody comes and touches me on the shoulder, and then go over and talk to that boy and apologize, make sure he's okay. None of the celebratory, I'm advancing, whatever, because it was about the respect. It was about the art itself, and the violence of it, the competition of it, is the application of the art. I think that's the thing. You and I talk about this off air at times about MMA, right? It's the thing that bonds you and I about MMA is the actual technique of it and the application of it. And we love seeing that. And they're like, man, so they drilled that for that long and figured out how to do this. And they saw to use yours. They saw Volkanovski do this against Islam, and now they're implementing it. Those were the things for me that always stood out. It wasn't about, I get to be this angry kid that goes out and tries to beat the holy hell out of my classmates, out of my teammates. It was, I get to learn this thing and get really good at it and then apply it, but it's applied within reason. And it always stood in contrast to, okay, I'm the new kid in school and it's day one and this guy came over and was like, hey, you're new. I don't like that. Let's fight. Okay, well, this is different. This kid isn't going to respect me if I get hurt. This kid isn't going to be like, oh, great, cool. You landed a good shot. That's 1 point. The bell has rung. We are done. And so it was nice to have that outlet that was controlled, that was contained, that was purposeful.
So you mentioned you obviously moved a lot and everything else, but how then does Spencer rationalize the world where the violence is untamed and the kid does come up and does say, you're new and I don't like you, let's go and have a straightener, as the correct word for it is?
Correct.
And what happens in those situations is that child able to deal with those situations in a rational manner? What happens in those situations?
So thankfully, I haven't gotten into a fist fight since about grade 6, which is many sixth year. So I don't know, probably like 11 years old, 12 years old, maybe.
Cool.
Maybe not even that, maybe only 10. Because I just stopped wanting to fight, because fighting sucks. Like getting punched in the face sucks. It hurts. You bleed as you wipe away blood from having caught a stray elbow. Initially, it was, to me, the first day, and so we'll go all the way back into this. I moved in probably about 6 weeks into the year for grade 3. So third year, and showed up. And the day I'm getting introduced, I get there early and I'm in the classroom meeting my teacher. And there's a kid in the little window of the classroom looking in and just going like this to me. And I was like, this doesn't seem good. This just doesn't seem right. And we go outside, and that young man, Jeff Arthur, said, you're new and I don't like that. This is my school. This is my classroom. Whammo. I mean, me and my brother had gotten into some dust ups. We had gotten into some pushing and shoving and, throwing haymakers and wild, wide hooks. So I started throwing back, and it just was what it was. And we got dragged to the office, and you sit down in front of the principal and we can't be having this. And I was like, what do you want me to do, lady? She's like, it's your first day here. I was like, what do you want me to do? Just catch an ass whipping? That ain't happening. And so for most of that year, he and I fought, and several times throughout the rest of our primary school days, we had a few dust ups. We had a couple periods where we were very close friends, which shows you that it was just childhood idiocy. But it was one of those things that it just always felt like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to have to do. Cause I was tiny. I mean, I'm not big now. I'm 5'10", maybe on my best day, but like I was tiny. I only grew when I was in high school. I only grew when I was, 15, 16 years old, and then finally got 6 or 8 inches. And so when you're the tiny new kid that is in grade 3 and looks like he should be in about grade 1, guess what? A couple options here. Catch a whole lot of beatings or fight back. And so it was just then accepted, like, okay, this is a thing that I got to do. Let's figure this out. And so then we worked on figuring it out.
Were you able to compartmentalize the difference, right? Because obviously
100%.
You
100%.
You were training, you were building a skill set in a martial art. Now, obviously, Taekwondo in a street fight has its limitations, right?
Let me tell you. Does it have limitations?
But there is an element there where there is a primal instinct, I think, where when an altercation occurs of that nature, if you have a set of skills or you have a set of training criteria, that sometimes takes over. Was there an element in young Spencer that enjoyed the altercations with Jeffrey Archer because it was I could kick this dude in the face and not have to respect him?
No, I hated every minute of it because I don't like getting hit. I don't like it at all. Like to this day, if my wife punches me in the arm unexpectedly, I will look at her and be like, would you just not? Because I mean, I had an older brother. We fought plenty. He and I have done damage to each other in those years, in all of those years. It was never fun. It was never a, okay, I have this thing and now I can show it off. As you said, Taekwondo isn't really great in a street fight. It doesn't really like it's an art where distance management and range management is really helpful. And at 7, 8, 9 years old, you're not really standing there thinking, okay, I've got to take 2 steps back and get into my Karate Kid stance here, and then I can throw this up kick. It was more hockey fights. It was grab the collar, throw the hands, try to get his shirt over his head and land a couple uppercuts, hope not to get punched. And usually, as these kinds of things are, it's 3 shots and then scramble to the ground and people grab you up and all of that stuff. And so it was, I got to do this or else it's going to come tomorrow again. Every time I do it, it's going to buy me a little bit longer of a respite until we get to a point where it's just like, all right, we're done doing this because we get in trouble all the time. We don't get to go outside at recess. So why don't we just knock this off? We can agree that we hate each other's guts, save for the year where we were best friends. And then nobody has to get punched in the mouth. I'd be okay with that.
Let's move slightly
forward
in the timeline. From Taekwondo, where does MMA come in?
So MMA comes in probably, I don't know, 3 years later, 2-3 years later. We moved to Hamilton. We stopped doing Taekwondo, which to this day is a thing I regret. Because then this isn't like me trying to be boastful. That's pretty good. I trained with one of the people in our school, won a bronze medal at the Olympics in Seoul in 1988. And that was a thing to me that I saw and was like, holy Jesus, somebody right here that I train with every day went on to achieve what is the pinnacle for this sport at this level. And I'm on this competition team with people that can have those same aspirations and dreams. And I've seen it happen. We talk about it all the time now with representation, and you don't believe it until you can see someone else do it. And so we moved, Taekwondo fell out of my life. And like a lot of people, we went to, it was Jumbo Video at the time in Hamilton. And, you know, you go through and parents pick out whatever they're going to pick out, and you look through the comedies and whatever. And then you make your way over to the sports section and see what wrestling videos are there, or basketball videos are there. And there's this 2-pack, UFC 1 and UFC 2. And we had seen the like trailers for it on, so this is dating myself, but back at this time, there was like a pay-per-view preview channel that would play little trailers of what was coming up on pay-per-view that month and give you like the tease of what was coming. And so I had seen the tease of the like UFC 1, UFC 2, whatever it was, of like, we're finally going to find out what the best martial, you know what I mean? And it was just fascinating. And so rent that up, slap that in the VCR when we get home and sit there just transfixed, glued to it, watching Hoist Gracie throw guillotines on people and arm bars on people, and just look over at my brother like, well, this is what we're going to try out in about 20 minutes. So you better start preparing. And for a while it was just hooked. It was just, I'm in. This is cool.
So as you were telling that story, you said we a lot, and obviously you mean you and your brother.
Yes.
Before we get to the question I have, can you just walk me through the moments there where very cinematically both of you are transfixed by this incredible spectacle that you're watching, and to think about it from sort of the perspective that you have to go and make the effort with your family to drive to the video store, you browse and browse and browse and browse, and you fall upon, just by serendipity, the same thing that you've been seeing the trailers for on the pay-per-view channel. You go home, the excitement builds, you finally find a time where you can shove it in the VCR, and you and your brother sit down, the anticipation, having watched and been involved in that pay-per-view preview channel for however many weeks or months it was leading up to that moment. You both watch it, you both are transfixed, and there's a moment that you turn to each other and there's a smile and a glint in each other's eye, like, this is the shit. Walk me through that moment.
So, I mean, it starts with a great big bald sumo getting kicked in the face and his tooth flying out, right? Like, you don't need to know who anybody is. You don't need to know any of there's no backstory. There's no setup to this. This isn't narrative. We both grew up watching wrestling. I loved professional wrestling as a child and still to this day enjoy the spectacle of it and the stories of it. But there was none of that. It was just these two dudes, and out goes Teely Tooley's tooth into the audience. And just that alone was like, oh, this is real and this is wild. And dude, can you believe we're watching this? Can you believe all the WWE we've watched, all the professional wrestling that all the moves, all the holds that we have tried on each other over the years of fighting, over the years of pretend backyard wrestling? Now we are watching the real thing. This isn't boxing. This isn't my Taekwondo tournaments. This is actual sanctioned, beat the Christ out of each other. And that guy's tooth just got kicked into the 7th row. What the hell is this? And how quickly can we watch the next one and figure out when these are happening? Because from here on out, I want to watch them.
So that moment, that builds a bond between you two as brothers, right? Can you speak to how, as you say, in the coming months and years, as UFC and the MMA bug hits, can you talk to how, both of you prevailed in your own individual sports, you both built communities outside of the home, you both had your own individual lives, but can you talk about how the impact MMA had as a bonding experience for you and your brother?
So it honestly, quite honestly, didn't all that much. It was very much like, this moment is awesome. And we sure enough tried to guillotine choke each other the next couple times we got into fights. But my brother at that point was already well on his way. He was done hockey. He was well on his way into pursuing a career in broadcasting through horse racing, and was just absolutely enveloped in that world. And so this was the little like, all right, I don't have to be at the races this evening or this weekend or whatever it is. Yeah, let's watch this thing. And he enjoyed it, but there wasn't the same like fascination beyond just the spectacle of it that I had. I looked at it and was like, okay, I need to know everything right now. I need to know everything. And he was like, yeah, this is cool. And again, I'm going to try to choke you out. But the next day, he wasn't still thinking about, how did that little Brazilian guy beat that guy? Like, that shouldn't have. What happened there? How does this work? He was on to, I've got to call these races, or I've got to handicap this race. And I was just like, no, I want to still talk about that thing. So it wasn't necessarily a like, me and him are bonded now by MMA. But in that moment, it was, this is a thing. Honestly, it was probably this is a thing that we can apply to those moments when we are fighting. When you and I get into it next, and it's going to happen because it's always happening. This is now a thing that, okay, I've got some new moves and you're going to have to learn how to defend them.
So where do you go from there? And equally, how do you get to a point where, from a child, and this is two very, very separate questions, but how do you go from a child who, grows up in Canada and is just bumbling along, to having this intense drive to know everything about a subject that you've just watched?
So I have always been somebody, whether it's blessed or cursed, I still don't know, with when the bug hits and I want to learn everything, I'm just in and I can retain information. The interesting thing about UFC at that time, right, is that it's on tapes, it's on pay-per-view, pre-internet, or very, very, very early days of internet. And so it's not just readily available. And quite honestly, after probably 4 or 5 UFCs, maybe 6, it just falls out of my life. Like, I know it's a thing that's there and that I watched and I enjoyed, and I see Ken Shamrock transition into the WWF, and I go, oh yeah, that's that guy, world's most dangerous man, all of this stuff. And he becomes sort of the holdover point, and it's back to professional wrestling. Like, we didn't have, this is going to make me sound like grandpa sitting on the front porch. I didn't have in Hamilton, Ontario, to my knowledge, the ability to track down old UFC tapes, or at the time UFC tapes, or anything else that was eventually to come down the pipe. It just became like, that was cool. Maybe one day I will cross paths with it again. Is it still a thing? And then several years later, hey, this is still a thing. Now they've got a reality TV show. Okay, I now have the ability to get all the way into this. Let me just find out about this.
Before we dive into that, meander me through the years where MMA fell out of your life, and how did you get to tough?
I mean, I think I got to tough just because I mean, professional wrestling, honestly, truthfully, and it's ironic that we're recording this on the day that Endeavor has purchased the WWE. Professional wrestling probably gets a big part of it. Like, it was a thing that I watched. I watched Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro every Monday religiously. I went to friends' houses to watch pay-per-views when there were, 3 or 4 a year, maybe 5 a year, not every month. And so that became sort of the holdover, right? Because the love of martial arts and the appreciation of martial arts never wanes. I'm still watching martial arts movies. I'm still watching professional wrestling. And so Ken Shamrock is there as sort of a tying fixture. But like, life-wise, day-to-day wise, year-to-year wise, it's not, MMA's gone for me. Like, I'm one of those people that through those dark ages, I was in the dark. I had all kinds of other things going on. And it wasn't let's find a way. He seemed to like this MMA thing. Let's find a way to introduce it to him. It just went by the boards until it rolled back around into my life of, hang on a minute, these guys, this is that UFC thing they're talking about. I think it was probably on like Best Damn Sports Show period back in the day, when one of the bigger fights, probably Chuck and Tito or Chuck and Randy, started to pop up. And they're talking about, oh, this is the UFC again. I remember the UFC. I loved it back then. Let me just hang out. Oh, okay. Now they've got a reality TV show. Let's just check this out. And then I'm in. Then I'm hooked.
So, talk me through the moment that you decided, not just I'm in, because as with everyone, you start as being a fan. I mean, for the most part, I think everyone starts at being a fan. Can you talk me through the moments that you decided, started to plant the seeds, started to water the idea that you could do this for a living, this covering this mad tooth-kicking competition?
So everybody's going to think this is the standard answer to sound humble and whatever. I didn't think I could do this for a living. Are you kidding me? This was a pipe dream. This was hey, maybe I can make a little bit of extra money. So I started off writing writing for me was always a thing that I enjoyed through school. It was what I should have went to university for, but did not because various reasons. mostly that I didn't have the wherewithal and personal strength to be like, no, I'd like to make my own decisions. You're footing the bill. Sure, I'll do the thing that you would like me to do. Grand. Hasn't served me well. I started writing about baseball, I think was the first thing that I really started writing about. Made like 3 cents a month on a nothing, loved the site, but a nothing site that just launched, but liked the idea of I can sit down every day and just put my thoughts on this thing that I watch out into the world. That led to writing about all sports for a site. And that was where I started writing UFC previews. So like a pay-per-view would come around and I would write a preview and here's what's happening and here's who's going to fight who and whatever. And then that became a little bit difficult trying to manage writing about 5, 6, 7 different sports and always keeping all of those thoughts fresh and prevalent. And so the couple weeks, maybe a month before my wife and I went away to get married, I left that place and said, okay, I know I want to do this writing thing. And I had been trying to write for Fight Magazine and reaching out to them and had some conversations with them about doing some editing and things like that. But I was a young, ignorant prick at the time and managed to get that taken away real quick or lose that real quick. But before we went away, I was like, I'm going to stop and figure out what it is that I want to do and just focus on one sport. And baseball felt like there was such a barrier to entry because it's been around forever. And so trying to talk to somebody on the Toronto Blue Jays is a very difficult feat for a brand new writer on a brand new site that has no clips, that has no credentials whatsoever. But I could see MMA from going to a handful of sites and reading Fight Magazine and a couple of the other things that were around. And it felt like there's room here. There's an avenue here. And so when we got back from our wedding, I was just like, you know what? I can launch a blog. I can start my own thing. And it can be just me again, every day, sit down, share my thoughts on what's happening. And that's where Keyboard Kimura was born.
So I'm going to make a slight detour
Okay.
because I'm selfish and
I like detours.
I want to. So the detour is going to be, talk to me about your relationship with the art of writing. Tell me why you fell in love with writing. Tell me why the words mean something to you.
I mean, ironically, the way you say that, I have to go back, and he was on this show. It is a thing that I will get tattooed on me at some point. It's Pip's lyric in I Feel Sick Tonight about I can twist these words and their meaning and it just being amazing. And I knew, so as we all have to do in high school and uni, you've got to do the papers, you've got to do the essays, whatever. They were never a challenge to me. It was never I know some people certainly labor over them and don't look forward to them. I was the kid that if you told me you need 1,500 words in 3 days on whatever it is, great, let's go. I wrote at the time it felt gargantuan, but it was probably no more than 2,500 words comparing the relationships of characters within King Lear. And it was my favorite thing that I had done through high school because I got to do this thing. And I had a creative writing class my last year of high school. So in Ontario, previously you could go back. It was essentially called grade 13. It was basically your preparation for going to university. And so one of the classes I took was a creative writing class with a great teacher, Mr. Scott Wells, who taught us about all the different types of writing. So the different types of literary compositions and styles and manners. And I remember I sat down, one of the assignments one week was to write, profiling different groups in a certain style. And I wrote about our school cafeteria as an ecosystem and the little pockets of everybody and who they were and what you heard and what differentiated them. And we had to get up and read them in class. And like representatives from all of these groups and subsets are sitting there. And I wasn't a popular kid in school by any stretch. And so I stand up there and I read this thing that takes shots at everybody in the room, and my group as well, my friends as well, myself as well. And everybody's just looking at me, and he looks at me and goes, well, that was awesome. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. This might be something. This might be a little thing that I can do. And then for me, writing just became a release at one point. I got let go from a job. I was working shitty work, living with some friends of my family in their basement, and needed to get all the noises in my head, all the ideas in my head out. And at that time, I wasn't anywhere near ready to go to therapy to talk about things. And I wasn't ready to write about those things specifically, but I could write about just whatever I wanted and create stories. And that's where it started. And to me, it has always still been a powerful vehicle for me, a thing that I do to this day. If I'm stuck on something, I will sit at this computer, I will sit at my laptop, I will sit on my phone and write it out to get it out of me. It's the only way I know how. I mean, talking now a little bit with therapy, but it's really the only way I know how to process and to get through whatever I need to get through. And so it just became the thing that was like, I think I'm okay at this. And if somebody then wants to pay me for this, that I get to sit here and do this, let's go.
There is a cathartic magic to being able to wind words around either a keyboard or a pencil or some form of writing instrument. Can you speak to, not from a perspective of believing and being told that you could be good at it, but from a very personal, very intimate perspective, can you speak to the excitement, the joy, the sadness that you can emanate when, not necessarily even in MMA, but when there is a subject matter and there is an ability for you to flush the veins via this ink that you're transposing onto the page?
So, I mean, even before that, I'm the guy that if I read something that is well written, or I hear a line somewhere that is well written, to this day, I will giggle out loud. And my wife will just look at me and be like, what? And I'll be like, that was a great line. Here's this line in this story. Here's the way they set this up. And so it's always, that part has always been there of like, that bit of joy, that joy creation has always been there. And then to learn how to do that a little bit, not that I'm a master by any stretch, but to learn how to convey whatever it is I'm thinking, feeling, need to express, whether it's angry stream of consciousness, whether it's thoughtful and sincere, whether it's now what I do for work of sitting and taking someone else's story and someone else's words that they've told me, or the visual of sitting with them and processing and rolling that back out to activate a response in somebody. I mean, for me, there's nothing. You said flush out the veins. Like, listen, let's go. Come on. There is something to it for me. And there are days where it doesn't come. And there are days where it doesn't feel as good as it should. There are days where I can't do it. And then there are days where I sit down and I have a conversation with somebody and I just sit here as they're talking and I put my phone on mute because I'm again giggling to myself that I get to I know I have a powerful story that I can craft here. They may not think they're giving me anything much, but you've said 5 words that I can now turn into, I'm going to pull at your heartstrings, or I'm going to make you love this guy going into this fight, or I'm going to make you dislike this person, or I'm going to show you a different side of this individual. And to just be able to do that with words, to just be able to do that in a way that has always just felt so natural to me, carries a lot of weight and speaks a lot to me, that and you're probably sitting there being like, so appreciate it more, dickhead. That I know I don't. I know I don't appreciate it enough, and I know I don't embrace it enough. And so thank you for making me talk about it.
I think the thing that comes out to me in that is that there is a glee at the ability to wield something that is both useless but innately powerful, depending on the configuration with which it's put together. And I think that speaks to your character. I think that speaks to the person you want to portray yourself as, the person that you like to talk to yourself as, right? But I'm interested in, are there moments as you're sort of developing the style that you choose to write with, from a professional sense anyway, is there a moment when that power really connects with you and you really realize what you're wielding?
I think it's probably the first couple times that somebody that I felt was influential, or somebody that I had reverence for, went, okay, I like this, and told me, or brought me along, right? So to be able to go from writing my little blog that is just my thoughts, that have, 4 or 5 people reading it, and posting it on Bleacher Report, back when I could use Bleacher Report as a distribution center, to have somebody go, hey, I want to talk to you about coming and joining this team, was like, wait a minute. These people think I know what I'm doing. Like, these people think there's value here. And then to carry that along through all these years of the province newspaper here in the Vancouver area giving me an opportunity, and Jonathan McDonald and Paul Chapman being like, you can do things that other people can't. And I'm not saying this to blow you up, because we don't really pay you much. We're not trying to get extra out of you. You give us way more value than you command, but you can do things that other people can't. To have my editor at UFC.com, Tom Gerbasi, start me at, 2 pieces a month of like, yeah, sure, kid, we'll give you a shot, to where now I write, I don't know, 25 things a month. And he entrusts me to do the recaps of live events, because he knows I can handle sitting down for 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is, and get across what needs to be get across in the style that it has to come across. Those things mean so much to me, that and resonate in ways that just, I can't even really truthfully articulate the depth of them, because having people go, there, you've got something. And whether they're right or not, just having somebody say you've got something is like, okay, thank you.
The lack of ability to articulate is ironic for a wordsmith, huh?
Yes. I run into it regularly.
Indeed. I bookmarked this topic for a little bit later on, but we'll do it now. You've mentioned 3 men there that I think we can determine them as mentors, as people that gave you a chance, gave you a shot. I just want you to walk me through the mentors you've had along the journey in MMA, from the newspaper when you offered yourself for free, to in some fashion a Jeremy Botter in the Bleacher Report, to some fashion obviously Mr. Jabracy. I just want you to walk me through, and we'll scattergun, we'll map this out, we'll get back to all the points, but
Yep.
I want you to talk through the mentors that you've had along the journey, what they did for you as a writer, as a human, and just walk me through that journey.
So Jeremy Botter brought me to Heavy MMA and Matt Brown, who gave me my first true opportunity, my first chance to be a part of a bigger, thriving team, which then afforded me the opportunity to attend live events, to cut my teeth on podcasting way back in the day, to be on camera, even in test runs of the old Fight Day show back in the day, where I got to sit and play whoever was going to be the guests for the panel discussions those days, and have to remember who they are, what they are, where they're at, and try my best to present them how they're going to present to Matt and Dave and whoever else is on the panel. Jonathan McDonald and Paul Chapman at the Province newspaper received an email from a kid that was picking produce and said, "Hey, I'd like to write about MMA for your website. Nobody does right now, and I think it is something your audience would like." And they said, "Okay, call us at this time on this day." And I ran out to my car and called them, and Jonathan checked 3 times that I was willing to do it for free. And over 8 years, and even Jonathan's departure, that went from writing on their website to eventually sporadically being in the newspaper, to going and covering events where I'm in the newspaper all week, to having a weekly column for 4 years. Every Friday, you would find my mug printed in the pages of one of the largest newspapers in Canada, in one of the largest centers in Canada and throughout the province, talking about this sport that I love and the people that I love within it. And to this day, they are people that I love and respect and appreciate. And then, I mean, Tom Gervasi is just, he's the godfather, man. He's the guy that yells at me the most, understandably. He is the guy that pushes me the most. He is the guy that believes in me the most. And I mean, for somebody that is so universally respected, like I've never encountered anybody that has had a bad opinion of Tom, that has had a bad thing to say about Tom. It's just not there. And so for somebody that is that universally respected to look at me and go, "You're on my team, and I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to stump for you whenever I can, whenever I need to. And you're the guy I'm going to call on when I need something." I'm stopping the words because the choke up is coming. It's unreal, right? He is the person that has looked at me and went, "You can do the things that other people can't." There are people that can do features and profiles and previews and recaps individually. And we do this thing where we talk about jack of all trades, master of none, as if it's a bad thing sometimes. But do you know how fucking hard it is to be really good at all kinds of things? And to have somebody that is universally respected look at me and go, "You can do all the things." And then add on to it, "So what are you doing in this mess of a sport?" I mean, I don't know. I just love it. But yeah, those are, and then you guys, right? Like, you're going to demure here, but in the span of barely a year, you have become one of my closest friends, one of my greatest allies. You are a person that very early on in our friendship and relationship went, yeah, the writing is great, but stop it and be on camera. Now we're doing this cool show that I adore, that lets me be me and show me and do me. And then you and Sean in September were like, future Severe MMA contributor Spencer Kyte. in passing as a bit of a joke. Here I am. And so, yeah, those are the people. And I mean, I have to say as well, my lovely wife, who
I was going to get on.
I got to make sure to throw her in here, because without her, none of this is possible. She affords me the opportunity to hang around the house in sweatpants every day, talking to fighters and smashing on keys.
So I wanted to link on Sarah, and Sarah has a whole topic in the notes section here.
Great.
I want to talk specifically. I'm gonna lay the context. So part of this is going to be telling your story for you, and I apologize for that. But you meet Sarah at a bar, you recognize the eyes, and you say, "Fuck, I'm gonna have to marry this woman, aren't I?" Right? You go away, you do the thing, you get married, and as you already mentioned, at the time of you guys getting married, it was sort of a crossroads, and a tumultuous crossroads. In one portion, you're going through one of the most sacred and beautiful rituals that life can afford you. You are choosing a life partner. You are choosing to be and give your entire self to another human for however long you can both stand each other. And yet, from a personal perspective, outside of a union, you're at this crossroads point where you don't really know what to do with your life. You don't really know what it is you want to be or how you want to move on in this world. Sarah is somebody that has believed in you and pushed you and at times forced you to go and do and be what you can be. So outside of mentors, can you speak to Sarah as a driving force, but also Sarah as somebody that helped to architect you being able to use this fucking stupid sport to build a life for?
So she has just always been the encouragement, right? In the early days, she was the encouragement. You can do this. I have no idea how to make this work. I'm working as a bartender and a server at a ski resort in the Rockies when we get married. She's in her first year working in a hospital. And not only am I at a crossroads, but she's at the start of a career, and it's rough and it's hard and it's difficult. And I'm sitting here being like, I want to be an internet writer at a time when everybody wanted to be an internet writer and everybody was becoming an internet writer. Before everybody had a podcast, everybody had a blog, and I had a blog, and several actually. And she just, from the jump, was like, chase it, go, figure it out, do what you need to do. Like, you seem to love this stuff. You're good at writing. Go, try. And there have been points along the way where it's been, okay, hang on a minute. You're going too hard. You need to pay attention to some other stuff and not just that. But that's part of life. That's part of relationships. She wouldn't attest to it, and she never believes it when I tell her. She's a huge part of the reason I'm able to do this and I've been as successful as I am, because she has truly, both in terms of supporting us as a family, but also as supporting me as a creative, as a artist, as a dreamer that wants to chase this dream, given me the leash and given me the rope to just go and figure this out. And when it's gone sideways, been like, okay, but you'll get it back. You'll figure it out. She hasn't ever been the one that went, well, that was a good run. Get a job, asshole. When there have been, fallow periods, when there have been, I don't know where the next one's coming. She's gone, okay, but you'll figure it out because you're really good at this, and stay with it. And so to have somebody that can look at life with me and we work it out to, this is how it's going to work. This is how we're going to map out and create our world, even if it's different from the image we had originally, if it's different from the image, the traditional image, and the image other people expect. Again, there's no words, there's no way to repay that. There's no way to recognize the importance and the value of that. I truly, truthfully, honestly would not be where I am 12, 13, 14 years into this if I didn't have a partner that from the jump went, okay, good luck. I got you. Let's go.
There's a gravity to that, right? There's a deep, deep gravity to that. And I think the archetype of the story so far has been one of community, whether that be the mentors around you, whether that be you banging on doors and try to force your way into communities at times. But there's also an archetype of sort of self-reliance and drive and an ability to with a push, at sometimes a large one, sometimes a smaller one, with a push and an air of recognition, there is a willingness to work, a willingness to achieve, a willingness to grow, right? And I think if we were to take that out of the writing space, if we were to take the word writer off that and we put the word athlete or fighter on that, those strengths, those characteristics are not too dissimilar from the fighters that you cover. And that's sort of where I'd like to go next. And that's the way that you write, or at least the niche with which you've carved for yourself. You and, Mr. DeBracy saying, oh yeah, that's great. Do that. Do more of that. Do more of that. Pushing, just putting the do more button and just hammering it, right? There is a part of you that I think parlays into the work you are and drives the work that you complete. Obviously, the people that are watching this know who you are, otherwise they wouldn't be watching it. But it's, can you speak to why the primary element of your coverage of MMA is not actually MMA at all? It's very little to do with the fights. It's very little to do with the face punching and the bone collisions. And it's actually to do with the representation of the fighters, of the athletes, of the stories. Why is that?
I want to say this. I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to sound glib and I'm not trying to be dismissive, but without them, none of this is here. And I think for me, it is hollow to look at these events every Saturday or whatever day, given your MMA, whatever your level of MMA consumption, and shouts to the people that watched like 3 shows at one time last Friday and watch every day of the week. I can't do it anymore. I'm old. But for me, it very quickly hit a point of, it will be very hollow if I just watch this and I don't know these men and women and I don't do anything in my power and everything in my power to tell you who they are, because who they are informs what they do. And as much as I look forward to seeing them out there competing and seeing, as you said, the bone collisions, I also know there's so much more behind that and so much more that goes into it. And the bits that inform what we see on Saturday are the bits that are so fascinating to me, because everybody has ended up in the same place, quite literally in that octagon, but they've all taken different roads and different paths and different upbringings and different hardships. And to me, that's where the interest is. It's the same as a good book. It's the same as a good film. It's the same as anything. Give me the story. You want me to be invested? You want me to pay attention? You want me to care? Tell me about that person. Make me care about that person. Because I can watch two people get into a fist fight in an octagon or a cage, to not use proprietary names, and enjoy it. But I will enjoy it even more, and I will be far more invested when I know something about that person and I know what this means to them, or how they got here, or what it can do for their family going forward. That's the bit for me that has always been key to try to explain to people and show to people.
If I were to ask you to take a step back on that approach and take a step back on that stanza of speech, what do you think your representation of this sport says about your character? What do you think that your approach says about who you are as a person?
Oh, my approach is all about, I mean, at the root of everything, my approach is, here, let me show you them so you can see me. To put it succinctly, and as I've probably processed with my therapist several times over, this whole thing is about, okay, let me show you me so that you can hopefully like me and shower me with some appreciation and adoration or praise or whatever. I want to showcase other people, because in doing so, it showcases bits of me. It's taken a long time for me to get comfortable writing myself into some of these stories, into some of these features. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I got really comfortable with being like, well, I'm the actual narrator here. Like I'm quite literally the person telling this story. So if there's a moment where I need to be woven into this, then I need to be woven into this. And I don't have to take myself out and remove, because it tells the story better. It conveys the things better. And so my ability and my desire to tell as provoking a story as possible, whether that's emotional or any other thing, is also just about showcasing who I am.
And I think there's sort of a beautiful irony in that, right? Which is, fighters, if you ask them, a lot of the reason that they're fighting is for very similar things as to why you're writing. And a lot of it, I think the beautiful irony there is you both, and you kind of said this, and I see a lot of you when you walk the 15 paces to get to your desk in your sweatpants in the morning, is like everyone ends up in the same octagon. Everyone ends up in the same cage, whether you're there battling the ideas of the day, whether an athlete is in there meat sack bone colliding with another meat sack bone colliding. There is a reference point, and that reference point can be seen, whether that's through your words. And I think as you say, you very succinctly said it, but there is an element where you bleed your own story subtly or bluntly through the story of those that wish to be heard, because you wish the same thing. And that kind of is MMA, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these men and women, whether this is a thing that they found and it's the only outlet, whether it's just the thing that they were good at, or whether it's, the progression through martial arts from childhood into grown adulthood, and I get to do this sport that I love as a profession. It's all to express themselves. It's all to put themselves and their being on display. And not only do I get to do that on video series here and in writing in different locations, but when I profile people, when I write these feature stories on these men and women, it absolutely is pieces of me in there, in the way I tell the story, in the bits that resonate, in the pieces that stand out. It's one of the things I talk to you about and applaud you for whenever you get around to sitting down and doing interviews with people. The way you interview people and the way you speak to them touches on angles that I don't ever think about, and approaches that I would never have, because you and I are just such very different people. And so I absolutely am woven into every single story I produce.
I wanted to take a slight diversion, and that's really to travel down the path of you as a fan of this thing, because you mentioned about the way you introduce fighters, the way you represent fighters, and how you push yourself through them. But it's difficult. This is one of the skills that I've struggled with, just to peel back the curtain a little. But for the longest time, I was just a fan of this sport. I was just a fan of these fighters. I was just a fan of the techniques. I was a fan of the stuff that they did when they are in the metal wall thing. Can you speak to, over the years, the fighters, not necessarily that you've had a personal relationship with, but more the fighters that you've struggled to not be a fan of, even though you're covering them professionally?
So I actually think the idea of, oh, well, you're a writer, you can't be a fan. To me, I don't buy it. The reason I got here in the first place was because I was a fan. The reason I invested myself in this sport and wanted to pursue this was because I was a fan, and I could parlay my passion for it and my passion for writing into something else. I'm still, every single Saturday, sitting there as a fan and enjoying every minute of this from a fan standpoint. Now, do I have to separate relationships and fandom from analysis and articulating my thoughts? And, when we do previews and breakdowns and offer fight picks, absolutely. Is it difficult at times? 100%. Are there Saturdays where I sit there and somebody that I have built a relationship with over years and years of speaking to them or more is stepping in that cage, and I kind of have to divorce myself from Twitter for that fight because I can't sit there and watch it impartially, or it's one of those things where I know I'm biased? Yeah, there's a few athletes like that. Court McGee, obviously, as people know, I've known Court very well for a number of years. It's hard for me to watch my guy compete. It's really hard watching him get knocked out a couple fights back or last fight. But I still think you can be a fan of these men and women and tell their stories and be impartial when you need to be. And to me, that comes down to trust between each other, integrity, and just honesty, right? I'm not out here taking shots. I'm not somebody that's going to call anybody a bum. I'm not anybody that's going to, every time you and I talk about somebody should retire or maybe move on or whatever, we always preface it with all due respect and we love. And I think that resonates with people. I think these athletes know that. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I can be impartial in my work and still trusted with their words and their stories, to where Listen, I've had conversations with people when I call them for an interview and they're like, you fucking picked against me. How'd that feel when I went out and knocked this person out? Or I thought we were friends and you picked against me. Yeah, we're friends. That was a terrible matchup for you. It just happens. And they eventually go, okay, I can understand that, because I'm not taking shots. I am, to the best of my abilities, operating with integrity and loyalty and just as straight ahead passion and appreciation as I can. And so I'm still to this day a fan at heart and will be, whether I'm doing this or not.
You mention a number of characteristics, a number of qualities, and again, I'm going to cliff note this part of the conversation and we'll come back. I had a question that I was going to start with, but then realized that there's a uniform start here and I should follow the rules, as it's not my fucking podcast. But the question I was going to ask was, you've just mentioned things like impartiality, professionalism, integrity, all of these sorts of things. We've spoken about your adoration with words, your relationship to words, the magic of words. I wanted to sort of creep up on this question a little bit throughout the conversation, but I'll ask it now. And that's, to you today, having written all 385 years of your life in some fashion, whether that be professionally or personally, what in you, what in the man, Spencer Kyte, makes a great writer?
A whole bunch of things. And it wildly depends on what you're writing, what your subject is, what you're trying to get across. Originality is very important to me. Creativity. I'm not somebody that is over concerned about, wordplay and the performative nature of words and things like that. There's a time and a place, and it works its way in every once in a while. Truthfully, a big thing for me is, the old axiom of why use 10 words when 3 will do. And then the other part of it, and the parts that are most important to me, and this is very much translated into my video work, my podcast stuff, is just integrity and authenticity of what you're saying. What really makes anything I read great to me or stand out to me is when I know it's what you actually believe, when I know it's what you actually want to convey. We've all sat down and read stuff where we're like, that dude just had to sit down and put 900 words together. Great. We've also sat down and went, Sean El Shadi just banged out the night we faced Jose Aldo. And you know that as he spent all of those hours that he and I talked about on this program, putting that together, he was also sitting there at home going, man, Jose fucking Aldo. God damn. And that resonates to me. Maybe it's my superpower. I can pick that up in 3 paragraphs. If you're not actually in it, if you're not actually invested, if this is just, I'm going through the motions, I'll see it and I'll stop reading. Or I'll read it through and just be like, man, you could have had all of these avenues. You could have gone all of these ways. And you decided to just phone it in. It's something that I hope and that I know has happened in the past. The minute somebody sees it with me, call me on it. Get at me. Because and it happens, right? There are days, I have this conversation with Tom all the time, right? I'll send my piece in and I'll be like, it's just a double. It's just, we use baseball references. They can't all, I'll say like, it's just a double. You know what I mean? They can't all be home runs. And he'll write back, you should try to hit a home run every time, kid. And I'll be like, hey, listen, I would like to, but sometimes you don't get the right pitch. Sometimes you showed up at the park and your mind's not in it, much like these athletes show up on fight night, and some nights it's just not there. But if there's ever a point where somebody reads something of mine and goes, or watches something of mine, listens to something of mine and goes, he didn't really care, you don't really mean that, get in my DMs and point it out to me, because I will then thank you and take real stock of whatever's going on. Because the one thing I can be and the one thing I want to be is authentic and genuine every time out.
Why?
So there's a bunch of reasons. One, these men and women deserve that. These men and women deserve my genuine thoughts, my genuine opinions, my genuine passion for what they're doing. Because in addition to delivering entertainment to you and I and the masses, they are putting their health on the line. They are putting their future well-being on the line. They accept all of those risks. They understand them. They go into them willingly. But for me to not be wholly invested, authentically, genuinely, truthfully in what I say while they're doing that is disrespectful. From a personal standpoint, it's a thing that I want to try to do with my life, full stop. I'm not great anymore with, and was for a long time, at putting on airs, at being a chameleon, of fitting in where I need to fit in and how I need to fit in, and accepting whatever the situation may be and it just being okay. I'm too old. I've been through too many things. I've made way too many mistakes living that life. So now you're going to get authentic me, like it or not for everybody. That's okay. I'd much rather be for 6 people and be genuine than be for 600 and be fake.
So again, I'm going to pivot slightly because you've mentioned 2 words that are in a question, and it's like we have this synergy and friendship, and we, it's very strange. You mentioned 2 things there. One is integrity, one is genuine. You are, and this might be a difficult question. If you don't want to answer it, that's fine. But you've worked for the UFC for a long time. Can you describe how your relationship with the UFC as a company, as a product, as an employee has changed over your lifespan with the company?
I don't know that it's really changed much at all. I am a freelancer that a check gets mailed out to, or it doesn't even get mailed out anymore. It just gets put into my bank account every 4th week after I send in an invoice. I have a great relationship with the PR teams. We've worked together now for over a decade, and that's always been great. You're always going to find tension and friction when, in addition to working for them, you do other things. And BC and I talked about this when he was on the show, Brian Campbell. There are difficulties, there are challenges. It's hard sometimes, but you learn the ropes, you learn where the landmines are, you learn where the boundaries are. And there's a very easy It's very easy mathematics. If you want to go across those boundaries, you absolutely can. You just won't work here anymore. And so some people will say, oh, you're taking the check over saying, maybe, but I have a mortgage, I have bills. And the other part of it is I've never been and don't want to be. It's not who I am as a person and as a writer, the person that wants to constantly rail at this company or the people within it. Are there things I disagree with? Of course. Are there things that I would and do advocate for that certainly go against positions they hold? Of course. Do I know where the lines are? Yeah. But I think that applies to so many industries, businesses, approaches, and we just don't talk about it in the same way because we, in our little insular bubble of a world with MMA, think that we're special and unique and that this stuff doesn't happen all over the place. And so I've figured out how to balance the things. I've figured out how to create my lane where I can do both.
And I guess that's kind of where my personal interest is there will have been times when the things, the characteristics that you hold so dear and that are clearly at the core function of who you are professionally and personally, they come to be challenged with actions that the company that you work for or members of the company that you work for undertake. And there is, and I think if I could try to articulate what you said in a slightly shorter way, the integrity and the genuine nature and everything that you hold dear lies firstly with your family and secondly with the passion that you take. Because there will be moments, and it's something that I'm personally very thankful for, is I can come on any podcast platform on SevereMMA,
right,
and I can say whatever the fuck I want, because this isn't the core function of how I make money, right? This isn't the thing that keeps a roof over mine and Ibby's head. This is just a thing that I do because I love it, and this is a thing that I do because I enjoy it. How do you, as a fuck writing or whatever, how do you as a man balance from a technical, from a literal perspective, how do you quash the
good
the,
word,
the personal defiance that would swell in you when you see acts that you think are wrong or egregious, but no, you have to ignore professionally in order to keep food in Biggie's bowl?
So it's not even necessarily ignore all the time, right? There are some things that they're just not things that I give a shit to talk about, that I want to waste energy on and oxygen on. There are some things that, yep, I have to use your words, quash those feelings. How do I deal with it? You get a lot of WhatsApps and a lot of, can we jump on a stream? My wife listens to innumerable rants, usually about the same 6 topics that drive me insane. I write a lot of things that just exist on hard drives and get deleted off notes apps and things like that. But the other part of it is that I've learned over the years and I've kind of prioritized for myself, what are the things that who do I want to be in this space and in this world? And if it's outside of that, yeah, I can feel a kind of way about it. Yeah, I can have whatever my opinion is about it. But is it the battle I need to have? And I think there are a lot of and again, this is wholly my stance, my position, my opinion. I think there are a lot of people that just want to fight for the sake of fighting. And I am on the other side of things, where it's going to take a lot to drag me into one of these fights, because it's not worth it to me, in both the literal sense of financially, it's not worth it for me to risk everything that I have and do to get into this fray. But it's also like at times intellectually not worth it to me. At times in that towards integrity and genuineness. Is it really a thing that I want to fight about? Am I really this upset about it that I want to really dive in and get into a fight about this and put a bunch of stuff on the line and push the chips into the middle and be like, well, this is the one? Most of the time, no. And so I'll process with you. I'll process with my wife. Bigger things I will process with my therapist. I will process with my dog while we go on walks. And then I'll move on to the work. That's the other piece of it. I have learned over the years, and this is a Tom Gerbasi drilling. Focus on the fucking work. Do the work. Put out the thing that you can put out. Put out the thing that you want to put out. So do I want to fixate on whatever the problem du jour is, whatever the outrage of the week is? Or do I want to tell the story of Rob Font going into this fight this weekend against Adrian Yanez and all the things that he went through in the midst of that fight with Chito Vera, that he was kind enough to sit down and give me 30 minutes of detailing that fight and what it felt like being in there and what's going through his head and how he's got to work through the negative thoughts in his own mind about, fuck, I just don't want to be here anymore. Do I want to tell that story, or do I want to get upset about this thing that it's a great line Neil Brennan has in comedians in cars getting coffee with Jerry Seinfeld on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have it on Netflix there or not. And he's talking to Seinfeld about, if my name ever pops up in one of these headlines of Neil Brennan is problematic, I want to just reach out to them and be like, can we wait 3 days? Can we wait 3 days and then get back to me and let me know if what I said or what I did really warrants where we're going with this? And he said it and I laughed, but I also went, he's right. Every day something pops up that somebody, and to each their own, wants to get real upset about and decides that everybody should take a stand on this one. Most of the time I'm just like, I could, but I'd also like to do this work that I have. And I've got 15 things on the whiteboard over here that I need to tell. And this person gave me their time for me to tell their story. So I'm going to focus on telling their story rather than just being the 17th voice that's upset about this thing that nobody's going to really give a fuck about tomorrow.
So I'm going to move on to the final topic.
All right.
Second to final topic.
Okay.
And that's also been an archetype of this conversation, and that's mental health. When you were running, and still sometimes on these podcasts, you have a signature sign-off, and that sign-off is sort of an ode to the people that may not be functioning at their full capacity. And it's a call for people to look after themselves, to be kind to one another. And there's often, bat signals thrown up with an offer of Twitter DMs or email or whatever else it is, to have conversations, to have open discourse about whatever number of X things that could be hindering full capacity. Why is that a big part of the way that you represent yourself in MMA? Why is it a part of who you are? Why is it something that you feel so strongly about?
Because there's not a day that goes by that I don't struggle with depression, anxiety, feelings of insecurity, and a lot of greater traumatic issues that I've dealt with over the course of my life that I process in therapy. Therapy has saved my life. Being able to sit down and dive into how I got to where I am through all the various roads and all the mistakes has kept me sane, has kept me here. And so if it took me 37 years, 36 years before finding that, and then probably 2 or 3 years in before I got to a point where I was okay being vulnerable and fully open with my therapist and with those closest to me, and still am not fully open and transparent with everybody, even those closest to me, about every part of my life, I know that there's 1, 2, 7, 9, 53 people sitting on the other end of this screen that are feeling the same way and that think nobody's going to get this. Nobody's going to understand. Well, I may not understand it wholly and fully, but I bet you I'm going to understand a piece of it. And even if I'm not, and you just need to talk to somebody, you just need somebody to listen, you just need to scream into a phone or just sit on the other end of a phone to hear someone else breathing. I got a phone. I'm here. I got time. I got people in my life that do it for me. One of the biggest things, not only career, but life in general for me. Nobody gets to where they are alone. I got to this point of my career by people giving me opportunities and answering questions and taking chances on me. And so it is incumbent on me to pay that forward. And from a mental health standpoint and just a human being standpoint, if I can help somebody and I choose not to, or I make myself unavailable, nah, man. Because I wouldn't be where I am without my wife, without my therapist, without you, without other close friends. And so if I can be that for somebody, anybody, whether I know them or not, I'm available. I'm here.
Well, that takes us to my final question and how we're going to end this.
Okay.
There are many people that, the same as you, watched an MMA fight or watched a pro wrestling show,
Match,
whatever. It's not even a fucking match.
event,
Yeah, whatever. Showcase,
sure.
facade,
performance,
whatever. Charade, whatever.
extravaganza.
Indeed. That will think, fuck, I like this, actually. This is cool. And it would be cool if I could do something professionally with it that's not pertaining to actually doing the charade or the fighting or the things. As somebody that's been in this game a significant portion of your life, has reached a level where you are a mentor to others in the same way you've been mentored. You've reached a position where you are respected and looked upon with reverie for the things that you do. You have a relationship filofax brimming with names of current, future, past MMA monoliths. What would your advice be? Not even necessarily on how to get into MMA, how to cover MMA, but what would your advice be to the younger generations that are looking to make a name, looking to build a career, looking to put food on their family's table via the vehicle of MMA?
So the first thing I would say is don't do this if you're looking to make a name. Don't do this because I want to be famous. Don't do this because I want to turn up on XYZ. Do this because you love it. Do this because you care. Do this because it is a passion and something you want to invest your time, your emotions, your sanity into. And then the second part of that is fucking do it. Do it. Do the work. Shawnee often talks about when people would ask him, right? Oh, how do I write for? I'd really love to. He says, okay, go and recap or go and preview the next 3 months of UFC events. Each one, just give me, even if you just want to do the main event, just right, go and do that. And if you can get through that, we can have a conversation. This is not for the faint of heart. There are ways to do it that are certainly for the faint of heart, but then you're doing it for different reasons. And so to me, it's do the work. Tom and I, Gervasi and I, laugh all the time. We have a recurring sort of joke text back and forth of, you know, when are these people doing any work? Because they're always on fucking Twitter. Do the work. I'm not on Twitter a lot. And it's because I'm doing the work. And so if you want to do this, do the work. Start wherever you start. Don't worry about, I want to be at X. I started on blogger.com with a free blog and did the work. I turned up every day and I put stuff out. And do it well. Look, some people can create characters and shticks and angles and avenues and personas and it works, and more power to them. But for me, it goes back to those things of authenticity, of genuine, of integrity, and doing the work. It's hard. This isn't like, I adore every minute of this. I hate most of it. I am frustrated by it all the time. I laugh every time a show or something presents the whole find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Bullshit. I love this with every fiber of my being. And I work exceptionally hard most days. Some days, not so much. Some days I hang out on the couch with Vicky. But most days, I got to work. And it's work. And it's hard. And you got to go through a bunch of headaches and hurdles and just stuff. Even as you said, at this level of whatever level I've attained, it doesn't suddenly get easier and straightforward and simple and everybody hands you. Still got to work. So do the work. That's it. To me, that's the only currency. That's the only thing that matters, is the work itself. Twitter following, IG following, fire of your Instagram, whatever, fine, great, cool. What's the substance? What's the work you've put out? That's the only currency I care about. It's why I like you. It's why you and I connected. Right away, I went, this kid fucking gets it. He loves this little angle. These are the things he's paying attention to. And he's drilling down on it. And he's here every Monday with the spotlight. And when he sits down and he talks about it, I can hear the passion and I know the work he's done in. You and Ian putting together notes upon notes upon notes for these preview shows and podcasts is doing the work. It's why every time we push out a UFC preview show, I will retweet it and say the best weekly UFC preview show in the business. Because there ain't anybody that prepares and knows as much and has as much to say that is the work is done than the 3 of us or 4 of us when Shawnee joins us. Do the work. Show me the work.
Well, on that note, I'm not even going to bother letting you shout out Twitters or Instagrams because people shouldn't be on them. They should be doing the work.
Do the work.
this hopefully has allowed some people to peel back the curtain on who you are as a human, who you are as a person, but also who you are as a professional and the reason with which you do what you do. So, for Spencer, I'm Harry, and this was A Conversation With.